Thank you, everyone, and welcome, everyone. This is the Rotary Club of Worldwide Impact, and we're excited today to share our mission and the work we do as part of Rotary International with you. My name is Sam Kendall, and I'm honored to be your host for today's program. Rotary International is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers in more than 46,000 clubs, all united in the common goal of making a positive impact in our communities and worldwide. Now, as a Rotary Club, we approach every conversation as an opportunity to learn and grow together. Our goal is to connect with and hear from fascinating and inspiring speakers, often with a message focused on the power of ideas to change lives and ultimately the world in which we live, and to bring you a little inspiration that allows you to think about how you can make a difference as well. Now, you may be hearing this on your favorite podcast service or watching it on our YouTube channel or viewing it on our club's website. Now, if you enjoy this program, we do ask that you share it with your friends, and don't forget to leave us a good rating and review. As you've probably heard many times, we also like those 5 stars. Now, today we are honored to have with us Nicki Clayton. Nicki is the Environment Area Focus Manager at Rotary International, who is here to talk about Rotary's work in the environment. Nicki has been in her position for about a year now, and as our club starts working on our first global grant that focuses on the environment, one of our implementing partners is on the call with us as well. We felt it was timely for us to learn a little bit more about the environment area of focus and kind of the different pieces around it. We can't wait for you to hear it, so please sit back, relax, and get ready to be inspired. For those of you who are joining us in person, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or once we have the question and answer period after Nicki does her presentation, you are more than welcome to raise your hand and I will call on you. So thank you very much. And Nicki, I'm going to hand you the mic.
Thank you so much, Sam, for that lovely introduction. Thank you so much for inviting me to tell you a little bit about Rotary's environment area of focus strategy. So today I'll be going over why we have a strategy, sort of the vision associated with Rotary's environment strategy, how one can implement the strategy, and then what some of the things that we're doing as clubs across the world in this realm. So Rotary's action plan, which you may be familiar with, has different pillars and strategic priorities and objectives. And the primary one for areas of focus are within the increase our impact pillar to focus our programs and offerings. I think we have a real opportunity, though, within the environment to show that we're increasing our ability to adapt, since this is the organization's newest area of focus. We just came on board in 2021 with the global grants. And then also, just because we are in this realm of dealing with some of the world's pressing issues with global climate change, pollution, waste, and the loss of biodiversity, I think we can also attract members and partners and enhance our participant engagement. So what you may or may not know is that all of Rotary's areas of focus align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So these are really goals to have a more peaceful and productive environment that we all live in. And so all of the different areas of focus align with certain one of these goals. In addition, all of the areas of focus have spent the last 3 years kind of creating their strategies, looking at what our vision is, what our priority programming areas are. And then we all have these common things that we're trying to do as we're starting to implement a wider strategy to look at impact. And those things are things like recognition of local issues. So really spending time on how we assess our community's needs and then how we come up with solutions. Shifting from heavy infrastructure projects to more towards social attitude changes in behavior. We're trying to engage in longer term projects, encourage measurement and reporting, and then also just increase service project opportunities as a whole. So that includes both global grants and just general service that we do at Rotary. So I'll talk specifically now about protecting the environment. So why do we care about the environment? Well, I think as all of you know, you can open up the headlines, you can look at your app, your news app, any kind of social media content, and you'll see the results of what we're experiencing right now on this planet with record-breaking temperatures happening in 2024. We're seeing that rise in sea levels at a very slow rate, but it could be detrimental in the future, loss of biodiversity. We're seeing polluted and depleted freshwater supplies, degraded soil, especially with some of the emerging contaminants like pharmaceuticals and PFAS, poor air quality, melting glaciers and permafrost. We're really seeing the impact from intense weather patterns. So hurricanes increasing, wildfires we've seen across the globe, flooding to heat waves and droughts as a result of those heat waves. And then plastic pollution is something that we're working a lot on at Rotary, and we're seeing that everywhere. And then just those other kind of impacts that come from the environment, like economic disruption, and then increased risk to public health. So I think we have a strong argument of why we're here today. And together we're going to act locally and globally with science-based evidence to sustainably address shared environmental issues and foster harmony between people and nature. So that really is our goal and our vision of the strategy. I have on the slide here that we have 4 sustainable development goals that really align with our current strategy. That's clean water and sanitation, climate action, life below water, and life on land. One could argue if you look at all 17 of the sustainable development goals that about 12 of them closely align with the environment. So the strategic objectives that we have, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each of these today just for time because I'd rather have a discussion and answer some of your questions. But one of the things that we're really trying to do is promote Rotary in the environment, both as an organization and then to external partners. Since we are a new area of focus, we are trying to show that people that we're doing service in this space. We're also looking at creating more meaningful long-term projects. A lot of times in the environmental realm, when we're doing projects around environment, it takes a longer time to see outcomes and impact. That immediate gratification sometimes isn't there right away. So we have to kind of stick with it. And that's where we're really looking for passionate members to lead longer term service projects. We're looking also at doing a better job of measuring and reporting on project outcomes, and I'll talk a little bit about that on a further slide. And then also just enhancing what we're doing within service, and then also within some of the priority programming areas that I'll cover. So what are some of our priority programming areas for the environment? The first is climate solutions. Initially, this was nature-based climate solutions, but we really have broadened it to climate solutions in general because we are seeing a lot of global grants and service projects that you as members are engaged in. I think this broadens our efforts to really focus on both mitigation and adaptation strategies. These are actions that Rotary members can take to conserve, restore, or better manage ecosystems. It also can range into promoting solar, renewable energy, and building resilient communities. And then we can really pair those two together a lot too, which strengthens our impact even more. So creating a nature center that encourages biodiversity and also having solar panels on that nature center so we get a little bit of environmental education. And then we're also going across areas of focus, which is another thing I didn't mention earlier, but a lot of this has interlap, right? Everything that we work on in the environment affects the other areas of focus. And I think it's important to strengthen that relationship as well. The second priority programming area is sustainable land use practices. So these are ways that promote soil health, protect biodiversity, and balance human needs with environmental protection. So some of the activities that we're seeing Rotary clubs involved in are doing compost at a large scale. They're working with schools and composting programs and then creating using that soil for community gardens. We're seeing recycling programs, reducing plastic use, integrating trees. So some of the agroforestry components that we're seeing, regenerative farming practices, and then also just in urban spaces, looking at things like rain gardens and green roofs and any kind of thing that we're doing in the urban landscape to have a better impact on the environment. And then lastly is freshwater and marine conservation. And none of these are in order, so none of them are more important than one another. Um, what we're seeing in this is actions that conserve, restore, protect, or sustain our freshwater and marine ecosystems. So these are really actions that clubs can take collectively to look at ecosystems as a whole. What we're seeing here are things like wetland projects, wastewater treatment. We've had a lot of marine reef restoration projects. We've had over 100 mangrove forest reforestations. And we're looking at better fishing practices or ecotourism practices in some of the island areas of the world. And then just some also things to do with habitat, increasing fish and aquatic life habitat. So one of the things that kind of falls under this is our partnership with the United Nations Environment Program. So our first initiative with UNEP is Community Action for Freshwater. So this is specifically under that other priority programming area of freshwater and marine ecosystems, but focusing on that freshwater component. So we're encouraging Rotary members to take action to protect, restore, and sustain freshwater ecosystems. It's also an opportunity for those that are already doing projects in the freshwater realm to register their projects with us. So over the last 2 years, since our partnership with the United Nations Environment Program started, we know that we have over 170 clubs interested in doing ecosystem restoration, and we have 13 projects registered on our new site, and I'll highlight that site in a little bit. Some of the projects that we're seeing are cleaning up waterways and beaches, starting to address those root causes of pollution, addressing not only the plastics in the river, but the sources of the plastic upstream. We have a few clubs doing citizen science in the world. There is a group that's actively collecting watershed samples in New Zealand right now and expanding to another watershed. But we have seen other clubs working with the local universities and partnering with other agencies to collect water samples in these freshwater projects. There are also examples of native species plantings. And then we've just been really encouraging collaboration with experts and local partners to influence change and be advocates for your local water bodies. So I'm going to transition a little bit to some of the tools that we have for service projects and building service projects within the environment area focus. This is just part of that longer term project building. The first is conducting community assessments. There's a really nice guide that we have online. This is how to bring people together in the community to gather the perspectives, identify the needs, and then inform different levels of the project, whether that just be a local service project or maybe a district grant or a global grant. It helps bring together people and ideas to brainstorm solutions. So it's really important to get that broad sweep of diverse voices in the community, because I think you have a better framing of the problem and then can come up with some really innovative solutions that way. And it's also a way to bring together what kind of baseline data you may have on your project. Another thing that we're encouraging, especially with the environment, but I'd like to see it across all areas of focus when you're looking at service, is an environmental assessment. So with the projects that you're proposing, what are the current local environmental threats to land, air, water resources in the ecosystem? What traditional ecological knowledge is at play? Are there cultural practices that are relevant to the project that we should be observing as we move forward with our solutions? And then also bringing to the table any kind of positive or negative environmental impacts that you might see as a result of the project. As part of the Rotary Impact Handbook, this is another really great guiding framework that we have for service in general. So not just global grants, but going through the whole process of project design, project planning, implementation, and then also like learning from what we implemented and then adapting for the future. I think this is really great that you're spread out as a club. And I think when you're taking action in a certain area, you can learn from whatever service project you might be doing in one area and then use some of those tools to implement it in a different area. With the environment, it's kind of hard to take a project idea and say, this is the way you're going to do it in San Diego, California, and this is the way you're going to do it in Mumbai, India, and this is how you're going to do it in the Netherlands, because we all have different ecosystems that we're part of, but the process can be the same. So I think coming up with those processes and being consistent is a great starting point. And also one of the things that we look at is the theory of change when we're building our projects. So looking at the building blocks of theory of change from inputs, the resources that we invest in the project, really the immediate results of activities are the outputs, and then the outcomes are those intermediate results. So that's when we start to see those changes in behavior and attitude and adoption of practices. And then the impact is really that positive long-term resulting change. So some of the support that we have for project development at Rotary is just I'm just one person, so I have to really depend on members as support. So we have technical cadre. So in the environment, we have several technical cadre that have expertise in the environment. They can help with project design. We also have Rotary action groups. So these are made up of members that are really passionate about environmental topics like environmental sustainability, endangered species, a food plant solutions Rotary action group that looks at highly nutritious foods that can be planted. And then our water, sanitation, and hygiene also overlaps with that community action for freshwater focus I was talking about earlier. We also have a community action for freshwater technical advisory group set up. So that's made of some of these members from Rotary action groups and technical cadre, along with UNEP staff and Rotary staff to help guide and develop projects. So what do we have? We have numerous websites associated with all of those Rotary action groups. There's often webinars and seminars like this one to take advantage of those learning opportunities. We have workshops at some of our in-person events like International Assembly, International Convention. There are a lot of written resources on our Community Action for Freshwater page. We do have some resources, basic resources on water or freshwater systems, but then we also have things like how to engage stakeholders or key partners. And I think that can be applicable to any kind of environmental project. There are also coaching opportunities if you're interested, and then also numerous newsletters, blogs, and other websites from coming out of Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation. So one of those strategic objectives I was talking about earlier is really kind of understanding where we have an impact to promote, and then things as we move forward, what kind of ways can we report? So I wanted to share with you some of the tools that we have for reporting on your service. So if you're doing individual service projects related to freshwater ecosystem, watershed projects, you can go to map.communityactionforfreshwater.org. That is a website that has a mapping tool where we're collecting project data associated with ecosystem restoration projects for community action for freshwater. And then any kind of activity that might be associated with that, we're starting to collect some of those outputs, that output data that's so important for when we are looking at local issues and then looking at our global impact. We can add up those key metrics and really tell a better story about our impact that we're having as an organization. For other service projects, we have Service Project Center. So you can say what area of focus you're working within. You can start to report out on indicators such as the amount of funding, the amount of volunteers that came to an activity. And we're adding some more questions in the next year or so that will further get at some of these indicators. And then also there's a global grant reporting system, which is also asking similar questions. So we're really trying to make sure the metrics that we're collecting across all service is something that we can compare and compile to tell our story. If you have impact stories, if you know of clubs or your club is doing something really exciting, let me know about it. You can always email me. And then we also have options to share our stories with the Rotary Service blog. So I just wanted to give you kind of a sample of some of the types of service projects we're seeing. This is a very, very small portion, but it just gives you kind of an idea of the different kinds of projects we're seeing. So one example of the Community Action for Freshwater Service project is one that we have coming out of Finland. Here, over 114 Rotary clubs have donated water testing bags to schools for the last few years. So they give them backpacks with water sampling equipment. It's built into the school's curriculum. Estonia is also going to be beginning this year. And the data are collected by the students, but then entered into the Finnish National Water Inventory site. And then there are also congruent clubs that are donating the backpack that are also doing monitoring at different locations for blue-green algae. So algae that's a response from too many nutrients being put into the freshwater systems. So they have a tool where they're also uploading all the data from that. So this is pretty exciting because it's happening at such a large scale. An example of a environmental service project that's preserving cultural rituals and the environment in India that we've seen reported on Service Project Center are that Rotary and Rotaract clubs are constructing clay Ganesha figures, and it's promoting just eco-friendly methods. A lot of times they were plastic or metal, and it would get back into the environment as waste, but they're creating it from local clay, and that way it's biodegradable. There's also some similar things around the Ganesha Puja, where there was a big Ganesha statue and they realized some of the pollution was entering the local lake. So they built a berm to help slow that runoff. And they also started advocating for lake water quality awareness around that event as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have many examples of successful mangrove restoration projects around the world. Mangroves are great because they're carbon sink. They promote climate resiliency. They're great for biodiversity and help in pollution mitigation from things coming off of the landscape into the ocean. Some of the examples of global grants in Taiwan, we have everything from tree frog restoration to solar panels in Kosovo on a hospital. In Brazil, we're seeing clubs implementing measures to increase biodiversity. There's some ecosystem projects to help protect springs and their drinking water supply. In Portugal, there's been some habitat creation for seahorse populations. And in Turkey, there's providing satellite tracking devices to aid in endangered sea turtles off the coast. So a really wide range of global grants coming in, everything from bees like yours and pollination projects. We're seeing a lot with circular economy, with collecting plastics and then weaving and reusing those into textiles. And so there's a lot of really great things happening. I'm going to end there just so we can have a little bit more of question and answer because I'm curious about doing and what you want to know about.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. I feel like I can speak for many of us. This was a great insight and kind of the different components around what's happening with Rotary in terms of our engagement around the environment. So we do appreciate this, albeit quick but very deep dive. If anyone has any questions, you can feel free to uh, select the react button down there and raise your hand if you would like to speak. Otherwise, you can put your question in the chat as well. Since I have the wonderful opportunity to be the host, I do have a couple of questions. So Nikki, you are our area focus manager for Rotary, and I was just wondering, how did you come to be working in the environmental space?
That's a great question, Sam. Thanks. I think part of it is the way I was raised. I think conservation and being thrifty It's just sort of a way of being in my family as I was raised, and not necessarily framed as, environmentally living. As far as a career, though, it started in college. I think I was kind of undecided for a while, but I had taken an environmental science class and was able to participate in a field trip to Costa Rica doing a research project on macroinvertebrates, so like the bugs that live in the water. And I think that international trip really helped me understand how connected we all are and lit a fire in me to start to really focus on more holistic research projects, because I really wanted to understand how things were connected and how we could protect this amazing planet that we lived in. So I think after that trip, I changed my major to geology, and then I went on to do some environmental education work.
Hmm.
I went back to grad school and got a another degree in geology, focusing on a groundwater research project. So it's all my research, and I would say passion has always been around water. And then before I came to Rotary, I worked for about 18 years in state government doing policy and regulation on watershed management, water quality, and water use protection. So.
Great. Martin asks, you touched upon during your presentation, climate change requires long-term thinking, but we as humans are often short-term in our decisions. How do Rotary strategies realistically help societies think and act on a time scale that the climate actually requires?
Well, that's a good question. I think, I think one of the ways that I a lot of times frame it when I'm talking about it, and I didn't go into it today, but I think there are kind of four different ways that we can look at taking climate action. And one is on the individual level, and the next would be kind of like the Rotary Club level, and then the district level, and then the like Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation level. So really, it goes back to the idea that we are a humanitarian local service organization, and it's really those first two tiers, right? What we can do as an individual, and I think really we have choices that we can make on a daily basis that align with the strategy. So there is everything that we can do when we're making choices about how we consume the food that we eat, and the food that we maybe even grow ourselves, the things that we buy, how we put our energy into things. I think that we have to be not looking at it as a long-term thing. I think we have to look at it as actions that we're taking now that are going to influence the future.
Yeah, that's it's really a great response. And I think for us as a club that is globally di diffused, I guess would be a great way to say it, since we're an e-club and we have members kind of all over the world as those on this call kind of show. What can we kind of do as a club collectively, but also what can we do individually, um, kind of around those pieces and around this newest area of focus?
Yeah, so I think for collective action, I think bringing in speakers, right, that are experts in topic areas that drive conversation and interest is one thing that you can be doing. Because I think a lot of times it's just raising awareness is like the first step, right? Like we can't really
Mm,
protect things that we don't understand or we don't know. Um, and I think individually, I think one of the things that I like to tell people all the time or ask people is like, when's the last time you've really spent time outside connecting with nature, or just looking at like a picture of a vacation you took, right? Like there's so many mental health benefits that we're finding out about being in nature, but also just having that connection and just that sense of awe and wonder. I think that really plants seeds in how we want to live our lives and protect the things that we care about. So that's kind of like an individual thing. Collectively, I would say too, like what I mentioned in the presentation is learning what from a global grant experience. If you're doing a service project in one area, talking about the service project and say, like finding out what worked and what didn't work. And then as you're designing future service projects, wherever you might be, like you're just going to learn how to do it more effectively and more efficiently.
Hmm. Yeah. We, speaking of service projects, our kind of implementing partner for our first global grant as a group has a great question. Dr. Chan, she says, thank you so much for your time today and kind of overviewing the amazing work Rotarians do worldwide. She's curious about metrics and measures, how variable are those measures across projects. She gives an example that when they write grants, funders can have a lens on longitudinal goal, but it's hard to kind of measure actual environmental change in a project that only lasts 1 to 3 years at most. So, what is the value of measuring attitudes and mindsets versus environmental measures? From her perspective, changing minds are a long-term investment and also in that environmental change. So, question on, I guess, monitoring and evaluation and measurement pieces.
Yeah, and it's not easy. And I think what you probably saw when I was giving the priority programming areas is that for the area focused environment, because we are so new, those priority programming areas are so broad. And even our global grant requirements are very broad in the environment area focus, right? You can do almost any project and get it to fit somewhere. And I think it's intentional and not just because we're new, we're really trying to figure out, like, as an organization, where our strengths are, like where Rotary can play a strong role, and also giving you maximum like flexibility, right? To do the projects that you really want to do. I think when it comes to metrics and measures, a lot of the things that we're looking at are really basic outputs in the beginning. We're really not collecting anything yet. So for an organization that's really like collectively at Rotary International, there are districts, there are clubs, there are Rotary action groups collecting data. So I want to say that, it's just kind of piecemealed right now. So what we're trying to do is drive monitoring and evaluation at this broader level. And it's going to take time just to teach people even that we need to collect. So we're really starting at simple measures and measures that align with all projects, for example, like how
Mhm.
many volunteers showed up at this event and how many hours were they there. And then it gets a little bit more specific depending on the type of project. So we're looking at like waste that might have been put into a landfill, but
Mhm.
was deflected. I think that measuring attitudes and mindsets, like you said, is much more difficult. But I think one way we can do that is by just basic surveys and asking questions in the beginning of a project, and then asking those same questions at the end of the project. And it may be not super, it might not seem significant at a club level, but I think really when we start to look at 43,000 clubs doing maybe that same kind of work, we would show that we're having significant impact.
So, kind of building off of that, you touched briefly on citizen science. Can you explain a bit more about what citizen science is and how a club like ours, which, like I said, is diffused around the world, could engage in citizen science as a club?
Sure. So citizen science is just kind of a fancy term for like a person going out and taking taking like a water sample or taking measurements of growth of a different species, or like collecting the number of bugs in a certain habitat, or looking at the species diversity in an area, with some training, of course. I think for citizen science, the way that we're using it with community action for freshwater, we are pairing up right now with Earthwatch because Earthwatch is connected with Freshwater Watch, which ties into SDG 6, which is clean water. And so we're encouraging maybe a little bit more of that longer term involvement with citizen science because members can go out and it's pretty easy. You dip the water sample jar in the water, and then there's basically a vial that you get through the testing kit. It changes colors. You look at what it says on the form and you upload it on your phone. And then there's scientists on the other end that quality assure the data, that they look at your other observations, maybe like temperature and if you're observing anything in the water, to see if that result made sense. And then it gets uploaded to our community action for freshwater site. So I think it's a really fun way to literally get your feet wet and get outside and do something. I also think it helps just it raises our curiosity, right? I think there are other options too. For partnering with local partners, whether it be, I know there's projects in Europe looking at invasive hornets or wasp populations, right? That
Hmm.
have to do with like killing off the good bees and identifying where they are. And so I think that there are other ways that citizens can be scientists. And I think really with some of the institutions that we normally rely on, seeing decreases in funding, I think citizen scientists are going to be even more important in getting that baseline data and really just keeping a pulse on what's happening.
Yeah. Looking to the future, kind of what trends do you see emerging in the realm of environmental sustainability that you think Rotary overall, so Rotary International or Rotary clubs around the world should be paying attention to?
Trends. I don't know if I like the word trends, Sam. I think
Fair enough.
and the reason I say that is because I feel like the environment's just not like some sort of trendy thing. It like is really the spaces where we work and where we live,
Hmm.
right? And where we worship or play, or I mean, it's the place we live, right? So I don't want to have to be on brand to like do work in the environment. But I would say as far as topics that are not going away, climate change is here. I think when we look at the four ways test, is it the truth? Yes, climate change is here, and we need to continue to look for solutions that move us away from using fossil fuels, reducing our carbon emissions.
Hmm.
We need that. We need to continually put pressure on leaders in our communities that support environment and climate action. Along with that is continuing to build resilient communities. As you saw, my laundry list of issues that we might be facing in, the next 20 years. We have to plan for natural disasters. We have to have infrastructure that can withstand either major flooding or how are we going to respond to major droughts.
Hmm.
And like I said earlier, I think we have an opportunity. I think the biggest thing that I've kind of been keeping my eye on right now um, is artificial intelligence and data center growth. We know that since 2014, we've expanded from about 500,000 data centers worldwide to 8 million. That's a UN figure. And it has serious power plant power strains. It's just very resource intensive and it's expanding at such a rate and in some areas of the world with very little regulation around it. So I think we need to be really conscious of how we're using AI as we move
Hmm.
forward, and we have to demand that um, we use technology in a very smart way moving forward. Because I do think that we can utilize it in the climate sphere, right? When we're looking
Hmm.
at very large data sets, it can really help us.
Yeah.
Maybe looking with potential solutions, but I think the rate at which these things are popping up without kind of the thinking of groundwater depletion and the increase in fossil fuels, we're trying to move away from uh, emissions. And I think with this really rapid expansion, it's just something that keeps me up at night. Let's put it that way.
Uh,
I think Anastasia
yeah,
has a question.
yeah. I was just gonna call.
Uh, yeah, the I can little bit filling in. Well, it is. I work for a data center. No, not data center, but we are. I work for a company that we are creating the boxes for making that storage. And now, like what I see, we have also invest a lot in a sustainable uh, data uh, center to create it a low emission as low as possible. The CO2 and the energy is so minimal. But let's be honest, this project sustainability is expensive. And how are we going to bring in the understanding? The company that I work for, we did it with the separation of a garbage, the packaging that we are material we separate it, and we do so less possible with plastic. It's almost like carton. It's almost like we are only paper. But it is almost, yeah, well, we can say we reach like more 70%, 80%, but it is so difficult because we also need some material to packaging the item. And so it is like, but that was another thing. But the thing is that some of the people who also, yeah, whoa, do we really have to do this? Do we really have to separate things? And then look, we have a lot of stuff to do and still have to think about sustainability. Most of us understand that and agree with it, and we move we move along with it, and we separate the packaging. And but what is your how you strategy on to bring in the consciousness? So that's gonna be a nice challenge.
Yeah, it's always, I think, that is, those are some really good points. I think that, I've heard different people say like, well, if this is more of an issue, if water access is more an issue, I think for me, when I'm talking about it, is I try to tie it back to what matters to them, um, or what the local needs are. So if it was a water access issue, the environment is really important there because we need clean water to survive, right? So I think when you can tie it back to the other areas of focus, whether it be peace, disease prevention and treatment, um, I think it's like we do depend on technology. Look at us now on this Zoom call, right? Um, but we also need to just think about how we do it in a really smart way. And I think having conversations like this, realizing what the local needs are, what the local issues are, and then coming up with innovative solutions, they may take a little bit longer time, right? Breaking down those boxes and separating out the plastics or for recycling or whatever it might be might take more time. But I think it goes back to that, like we have individual choices um, with what we do. And I think it's just, we just have to make small choices, and those small choices will eventually lead to bigger change.
Last question is from Francine. How do you think in relation to Rotary, um, about the responsibility and leading by example? For example, in the meetings and conventions we organize.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing like at the Rotary International level is that we do we have, for example, with our environmental sustainability Rotary Action Group, there actually is a campaign to green your club. So there are guides on how to have green meetings. There's been pressure put on to have less, you know, consumables and throwaways at conventions and bigger meetings. I know from a staff perspective, we try to do lower emission flights. There's been some active voices within SREG as well to be a net zero hero. One thing I didn't mention, as an individual, you can calculate your carbon footprint or your water footprint and then figure out how to offset your carbon. And there are some Rotary clubs in the UK that actually have set up a net zero hero program where you can donate basically to Rotary clubs that are doing calculated carbon offsets. So it's not like an official Rotary International carbon offset program, but they are trying to encourage people to be net zero heroes. We do at ORC, which is our headquarters building. It's a LEED certified building. So a few years ago, they replaced the heating and cooling system with more efficiency. There's electric car spaces in the parking lot by ORC. They've done native plantings. We're doing composting in the cafeteria now. And they are trying to get rid of single-use plastics. So there is a slow change, right? And I think there is something called the Green Committee as part of the Secretariat, and we're continually doing brown bag lunches to just let staff and leadership know about the different things. And like, for example, we have a AI ethics and environment talk for our learning opportunities next week for staff as well. So I think we're trying to continually inform and just raise that awareness on a continual basis. And that's the best thing that we can do.
Well, thank you so much, Nicki, for this great presentation. I, for one, enjoyed it a lot, and I hope everyone on the call did as well. I know I, for one, found it very helpful and informative. Even though I do work in this space, it's always great to hear Nicki as well kind of explain a little bit more about the environment area focus. If you Those listening or watching, if you feel inspired to get involved and make a difference in your community, we do invite you to learn more about Rotary International and Rotary Club Worldwide Impact. You can find those in our about sections on this video and or podcast. And with that, I would like to send a huge thank you again to Nicki Clayton for being here with us. I know her schedule is quite full, and she has many different things that she has to do as an area focus manager. So I do want to thank her one more time, and I will turn it back over to her if she has any last words before we officially sign off. Nicki, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. I would just say thank you for inviting me. I really actually enjoy talking to clubs because I feel like you are the ones doing the work. And so it's nice to hear what you're thinking and hear about what you're doing because it inspires me to keep on going with my job. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. For those who are part of our great Rotary Club, we look forward to continuing the conversation in our different communication channels. And for everyone else who joined us, feel free to reach out. We always love having others join us in those communication channels as well. Thank you all, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week, wherever you are in the world.